Welcome back to the deep dive. It's really good to have you with us. Today we are slowing things down a little. Usually, we're racing through trends or trying to unpack these really complex systems. But today, the source material we're looking at, it kind of requires us to step back.
Yeah, take a breath.
Take a breath and really look at something that we all think we know, but maybe we haven't fully grasped it. We are looking at one of the most pivotal mornings in all of human history.
It's a morning that, it changed everything. And we're looking at it through a very specific lens today.
We are.
We're focusing on a figure who's standing right at the center of the storm. A man who, in so many ways, he represents the intersection of, human history and divine providence. We're talking about Pontius Pilate and the role he's fulfilled in the death of Christ.
It is a heavy topic. And the source material we're working with, it's a deep reflection by Brother Woody Brum titled, "What Role Did Pontius Pilate Fulfill in the Death of Christ?" It just doesn't let us get away with a superficial reading. It really challenges us to look past the caricature.
That's the temptation, isn't it?
It is.
To see Pilate as just the villain in the pageant. Or, maybe just the hand washer. The image, he washes his hands, he claims innocence, and then he just exits stage left.
Right.
But when you look at the text, specifically Mark 15, there is a much more complex human drama unfolding there.
There is. And the tension we're going to explore it's just profound. It's the tension of a man standing at a crossroads. On one side, you have justice, you have truth, and the obvious innocence of the accused. And then on the other side, you have political convenience, self-preservation, and the roar of the crowd.
And the scary part, I think the part that really hits home for a lot of us, is that Pilate isn't some, chaotic monster.
Yeah.
He's a pragmatic administrator.
Right. He's a bureaucrat.
He's a bureaucrat. He's trying to keep his job. He's trying to keep the peace. And in that effort to save his own skin, he ends up playing this necessary role in the central moment of redemptive history.
And that's really the mission for this deep dive. We want to try and understand how a flawed human ruler, operating within a corrupt system, was used by God to fulfill a plan that was set before the foundation of the world.
Yeah.
We're going to see that human governments, with all their flaws, all their bureaucracy, their compromises, they cannot hinder God's purposes.
In fact, the argument here is that God often works through those very flaws.
He does, and we have to keep one verse sort of anchored in our minds as we walk through this. It's Mark 10:45.
Right.
"For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Everything we see today, the injustice, the shouting, the fear, all of it is the mechanism by which that ransom was paid.
It's a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
The greatest injustice in history accomplished the greatest justice in eternity.
Well,
But to really feel the weight of that, we can't just stay in the theological abstract. We have to go back to the ground level. We have to understand the world Pilate woke up to that morning.
You're absolutely right. Context is everything here. We often read the Gospels with, 21st century eyes, assuming a separation of church and state or a presumption of innocence. But first century Judea, it was a very, very different beast.
It was an occupied territory.
Yeah.
And that wasn't just like a political designation on a map.
No.
It was a sensory reality. It was something you felt every day.
Absolutely. Just think about what life looks like under the Pax Romana, the Peace of Rome. Now, in history books, the Pax Romana is, it's celebrated. It brought roads, it brought trade, it brought a lack of major wars between nations.
Sure. On a macro level.
Right. But for a Judean living in Jerusalem, that peace was maintained by the point of a spear.
It was peace through intimidation. I've read that the Antonia fortress, the Roman barracks, it literally loomed over the temple courts.
It did.
So you would be there worshiping God, offering your sacrifices, and you could look up and see Roman sentries just watching you, hand on their swords. It was a constant reminder of who was really in charge.
That is a perfect image. The hard reality, as our source material puts it, was completely unavoidable. You had tax collectors on the corners taking Jewish money to fund a pagan empire. You had foreign laws. And Judea wasn't just any province. It was kind of the problem child of the empire.
Because of the religious distinction, right?
Precisely. If you're Rome, governing Gaul or Spain is one thing. You conquer them, you integrate their gods into your pantheon, and everyone sort of moves on. But the Jews,
They were different.
they had one God. They had a law that superseded Caesar. They believed they were chosen, and that this occupation was a spiritual affront, not just a political one.
So the atmosphere is always tense. It's like a powder keg.
A powder keg just waiting for a spark. And into this volatile mix, you have this man, Pontius Pilate. He served as prefect from AD 26 to 36. And his job was simple on paper, but, impossible in practice.
What was it?
Keep the taxes flowing and keep the peace.
And from what we know of him from history, he wasn't exactly known for his diplomatic touch, was he?
Not at all. Historical sources outside the Bible people, like Josephus and Philo, they paint a picture of a man who was stubborn, inflexible, and often prone to provoking the very people he was supposed to govern.
Oh, wow.
There's this one story where he brought Roman standards, these poles with the image of the emperor on them, into Jerusalem by night. And it caused a massive riot because it violated the Jewish law against graven images.
He had to have known that would happen.
You'd think so. Another time, he used money from the temple treasury to build an aqueduct, which, sounds like a good public works project, but it caused another riot because it was sacred money.
So by the time we get to the trial of Jesus, Pilate has already burned a lot of bridges. He's on thin ice with the locals, and probably on thin ice with Rome, too.
That is the critical piece of the puzzle. The emperor at the time, Tiberius, was not a forgiving man. He was known to be paranoid and brutal.
So Pilate knew that one more major riot, one more report of incompetence or, insurrection on his watch.
It could be the end of his career.
Or even his life.
Exactly. He was managing risk. He wasn't seeking justice.
And then you add the timing of this trial. It's Passover.
The single most dangerous week of the year for a Roman governor in Judea. Jerusalem usually had a population of, maybe 50,000?
Okay.
But during Passover, that number could swell to 200,000, maybe more, pilgrims flooding in from all over the known world.
And the festival itself is all about liberation. It celebrates God delivering his people from a foreign oppressor, Egypt.
Exactly.
So the nationalistic fervor must have been just off the charts. You can almost hear them thinking, God did it before.
Yeah.
He can do it again with Rome.
Yes, the air would have been electric with the possibility of revolution. And that's why Pilate was even in Jerusalem. He usually lived in Caesarea Maritima, this nice Roman city on the coast, sea breezes, baths.
Right.
He only came to the dusty, crowded city of Jerusalem during the major festivals to make sure the legions were visible, to suppress any uprising before it could even start.
So he's already on edge. He's probably tired. He's surrounded by people who hate him. And then early in the morning, the chief priests drag a prisoner to his doorstep.
And so begins the legal narrative of Mark chapter 15. The sun is barely up. The Sanhedrin, the Jewish High Council, they've already held their kangaroo court during the night. They've condemned Jesus religiously, but they have a problem.
A big one. They can't execute him.
Correct. And this is a crucial legal distinction. The Romans operated on a system where local councils could handle minor disputes. The Sanhedrin could govern religious life, they could even order floggings, but they did not possess the jus claudii.
The right of the sword.
The right of the sword. The power over life and death was Rome's monopoly.
It was the ultimate sign of sovereignty, wasn't it?
It was. If you can kill a man legally, you are the ruler. If you can't, you are a subject. So the Jewish leaders, they had to bring Jesus to Pilate. But notice the shift in the accusation. In their own court, what did they charge Jesus with?
Blasphemy. Claiming to be the Son of God.
Right. But if they walk up to Pilate and say, this man committed blasphemy against our God, what's Pilate going to do?
He'd laugh them out of the praetorium.
He'd laugh them out. Rome doesn't care about Jewish theological disputes. There's another Roman official in the book of Acts, Gallio, who basically says this later on, if it's a matter of words and names and your own law, see to it yourselves.
So they have to translate the charge. They have to turn a religious crime into a political one.
Exactly. They have to frame it as treason. Mark 15, verse 1, tells us they bound him and handed him over. And Pilate's very first question in verse 2 cuts right to the heart of the political threat.
Are you the king of the Jews?
It's such a loaded question, because in Pilate's world, there was only one king, and that is Caesar.
And anyone claiming to be a king within the empire without Rome's permission is committing Majesta's high treason.
A capital offense.
Absolutely.
So Pilate is asking, are you a revolutionary? Are you trying to usurp the government?
And Jesus' response is so fascinating. He doesn't give a speech. He doesn't launch into a defense. He just says,
you have said so.
It's so enigmatic. What does that even mean?
Well, in the original language, it's a kind of non-committal affirmation. It's like saying, that is your term, not mine.
I see.
He isn't denying his kingship, but he's also not accepting the political baggage that Pilate attaches to it. He's making it clear he isn't the kind of king Pilate is worried about.
And Pilate seems to sense that, doesn't he? I mean, Mark says later that Pilate realized it was out of envy that the chief priests handed him over.
This is a key insight into Pilate's mind. He was a seasoned administrator. He knew what a revolutionary looked like. He had seen zealots. He had seen these wild-eyed rebels. And here stands Jesus, calm, battered, silent.
He's not ranting. He's not calling down fire.
Yeah.
He's not, and that silence is. It's unnerving. Most prisoners would be begging, screaming, blaming someone else.
Right, fighting for their life.
The text says Pilate marveled. He was accustomed to the desperate pleas of guilty men. Jesus' silence was commanding. It showed a dignity that just didn't fit the situation.
So he sees what's really going on.
He does. He looks at the chief priests, he looks at Jesus, and the math is easy for him. This man is not a threat to Rome. These priests are just using me to get rid of a rival.
So legally, the trial should end right there.
It should.
No case. Get out.
In a just world, yes. But we have to remember, Pilate isn't seeking justice. He is managing risk. He knows the priests are powerful. He knows they can stir up the crowds. So he looks for a way to thread the needle.
An escape plan.
He wants to release Jesus, but he needs to do it in a way that doesn't cause a riot.
So he tries to get the crowd on his side. He uses the Passover amnesty custom.
Exactly. Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews? He's thinking, surely the people will choose the miracle worker over a convicted terrorist. He thinks this is a brilliant move.
And this brings us to Barabbas. I feel like we often skip over him too quickly, but the source material really lingers on the significance here.
Oh, we must linger here. Barabbas wasn't just some random thief. Mark tells us he was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising.
So he was a zealot, a freedom fighter in his own mind.
A violent man, a man who had blood on his hands, a known figure.
And the irony of his name is always just staggering to me. Barabbas.
Son of the Father.
Yes?
You have Jesus, the true Son of the Father, who brings life, and you have Barabbas, a son of the Father who brings death. I mean, the choice could not be starker.
And Pilate offers them this choice.
Yeah.
And the crowd, stirred up by the priests, they just shout for Barabbas.
It's mob psychology at its most terrifying, isn't it? The priests have worked through the crowd, whispering, inciting, maybe playing on their hatred of Rome. Barabbas fought the Romans. Jesus just talks. And suddenly the whole roar of the crowd shifts. Give us Barabbas!
Pilate must have been just stunned, completely blindsided.
He asks them, then what shall I do with the man you call the King of the Jews? And the scream comes back, crucify him.
He even asks why in verse 14. What evil has he done?
It's a desperate question. You can almost hear the pleading in his voice. He's pleading for a reason to let him go, but mobs don't deal in reasons.
No.
They just shout all the more, crucify him. And this is the moment. The pressure cooker explodes. Pilate looks at the sea of angry faces. He hears the threat in their voices. He knows that if he refuses, blood will flow in the streets, and perhaps it'll even be his own.
And so we get Mark 15:15. One of the saddest verses in the entire Bible.
Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified.
Wanting to satisfy the crowd.
That's it. That is the epitaph of his integrity. He knew the truth. He had the authority. But he sacrificed the innocent to pacify the mob. He chose his immediate comfort and his safety over the eternal principles of justice.
And then the mechanism of Rome just takes over. The soldiers, the mockery.
It's brutal efficiency. They dress him in purple, the color of royalty. They weave a crown of thorns. They salute him. Hail, King of the Jews.
It's meant to be satire. It's cruel. They're laughing at the idea that this broken Jewish peasant could ever be a king.
But the source material points out the profound irony here. Everything they did in mockery was actually testifying to the truth.
How so?
Well, the inscription over his head on the cross, the King of the Jews, it was meant to be an accusation, a warning to other would-be rebels. But it was actually the first gospel tract.
Wow.
It proclaimed his true identity to the world.
Even the darkness that fell over the land. Even the curtain in the temple tearing in two. And then you have the centurion.
Yes, the centurion. The veteran Roman soldier who had likely seen hundreds of crucifixions. This was just another Tuesday for him.
Right.
But he watches how Jesus dies. He hears the final cry. And he breaks ranks with all the mockery to say, surely this man was the Son of God.
It is amazing that while the religious leaders are completely blind, a pagan executioner sees the light.
It signals the beginning of a new era. But before we get there, we need to pause and pivot. We have walked through the history. We've seen the trial. Now we need to put on our theological lenses, because if we just stop at the history, it's a tragedy. It's a complete miscarriage of justice.
Right. It looks like everything went wrong. Jesus was innocent, the system failed him, the bad guys won.
Exactly. But the Bible pulls back the curtain to show us that this was not a failure of Plan A. This was Plan A. We need to talk about sovereignty over human authority.
Jesus actually addresses this directly with Pilate in the Gospel of John, doesn't he?
He does. And it's a moment that must have chilled Pilate to the bone, even if he didn't fully understand it. Pilate is getting frustrated with Jesus' silence, and he says, "Do you not know that I have power to release you and power to crucify you?"
He's flaunting his authority.
He is. He's playing his trump card. And what does Jesus reply?
You could have no power at all against me unless it had been given you from above.
Wow. That completely flips the script.
It does.
Pilate thinks he is the judge. Jesus tells him he is just an instrument.
The hierarchy of power is made crystal clear in that moment. Pilate is a middle manager in the Roman Empire, but he is also an unwitting servant in the kingdom of God.
That intersection of Pilate's courtroom, it's where prophecy and history collide. Human authority operates, but only within the boundaries that God sets.
So Pilate's free will, his fear, his choice to satisfy the crowd, that was all real. He's responsible for it.
Absolutely.
But God used that specific choice to accomplish his sovereign will.
Exactly. It's the great mystery of compatibilism. Acts chapter 4, verses 27 and 28 put it perfectly. "For truly against your holy servant Jesus, both Herod and Pontius Pilate, with the Gentiles and the people of Israel, were gathered together to do whatever your hand and your purpose determined before to be done. They did what they wanted to do, and in doing so, they did what God determined would be done."
And this links directly to the fulfillment of prophecy. The source we're using mentions Isaiah 53 and Zechariah 12.
This is where the specific role of Pilate becomes so essential. Why did it have to be a Roman trial? I mean, why couldn't the Sanhedrin just have stoned him like they did to Stephen later in the book of Acts?
Because the prophecies were very specific about the manner of death.
Right. Psalm 22 says, "They pierced my hands and my feet." Zechariah 12.10 says, "They will look on me whom they have pierced." And Isaiah 53 says, "He was numbered with the transgressors."
And stoning crushes.
Yeah.
It doesn't pierce in that same way.
Exactly. Jewish execution was stoning. Roman execution was crucifixion. For the Messiah to be lifted up, as John chapter 3 says, and to be pierced, it required the Roman judicial machinery.
So God used the occupation, the specific laws of Rome, and even the specific character flaws of Pilate
Yes.
to ensure that death happened exactly as the prophets whispered it would centuries before.
That is mind-blowing precision. I mean, even the legal technicalities of the Jus Gladii were part of the setup for prophecy fulfillment.
Nothing is wasted.
Nothing. And there's another layer here, which is the shift to the Gentiles.
Jesus predicted this, right? I think it's in Mark 10.33.
It is. He told the disciples, "The Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him to the Gentiles." This handover is hugely significant.
It feels like a foreshadowing of something bigger.
It is. The Jewish leaders rejected their king, handing him over to the nations, the Gentiles. And in the very act of executing him, the Roman Empire became the stage for the gospel. Think about it. Pilate wrote the inscription on the cross in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin.
The three major languages of the ancient world.
Precisely. The languages of religion, culture, and law. From the very moment of his death, Jesus was being proclaimed to the whole world, not just Israel.
And the Roman rose, the Roman peace, the common Greek language.
All of the infrastructure that Pilate represented would become the highway for the message of the cross.
It really shows that God plays the long game.
The longest game.
I want to, if we can, move us to application. Because while the history and theology are just fascinating, we are real people living in a real world. We face decisions. We face pressure. What do we take away from Pilate?
There are several layers of application here, I think, and the first is a warning about leadership and integrity. We have to look at Pilate and see a mirror.
That's uncomfortable. I'd much rather see a monster.
It is much safer to see a monster, isn't it? But Pilate was just a man who valued his position more than he valued the truth. And how often do we face that choice? Maybe not with life and death, but in our careers, in our families.
If I speak up about this unethical practice, I might lose my promotion. Or if I don't agree with the group, I'll be ostracized.
Exactly. Pilate famously asked, "What is truth?" But he didn't stay for an answer because the truth was inconvenient. The warning for us is that compromise is a slippery slope. The moment we start making decisions based on satisfying the crowd, whether that crowd is our voters, our board of directors, or our social media followers, we are walking in Pilate's footsteps.
It really challenges us to ask ourselves, what is my price? Is there a point where I will sell out what I know is right to stay comfortable or to stay safe?
Pilate's price was his governorship. He kept the job, for a while at least, but he lost his soul in the process.
There's also a lesson here about government, isn't there? I mean, we live in a time where people put a lot of hope or a lot of fear in politics.
We do, and the trial of Jesus puts politics in its proper place. Government is God's servant, meant to keep order. Pilate had a role. But government is not God. It cannot save. It cannot define ultimate truth.
Rome could execute Jesus, but it couldn't keep him in the grave.
Exactly. The limits of state power are exposed at the empty tomb. So for the believer, our posture toward government is balanced. We are responsible citizens. We pay our taxes. We obey the laws. We pray for our leaders, as Paul instructs in 1 Timothy 2.
Sure.
But we do not give them our ultimate allegiance. We know that Caesar is just a man. We trust in the kingdom that is not of this world.
That's incredibly freeing. It means I don't have to panic when the wrong person is in power or when the wrong party is in control.
You don't have to panic because you know who is actually on the throne. Which leads to the most comforting application of all. God working through imperfection.
I love this point because my life is full of imperfections. My workplace is flawed. The world is messy.
And it is so easy to feel like God's plan is being blocked by human incompetence or even by malice. You know, my boss is a tyrant, so God can't use me here. Or the laws are unjust, so everything is hopeless.
But the story of Pilate proves that wrong.
Pilate proves that God is the master weaver. He takes the ragged, dark threads of human sin, Pilate's cowardice, the priest's envy, the crowd's fickleness, and he weaves them into the beautiful tapestry of redemption.
So when we face injustice in our own lives, we don't have to despair.
We don't. We can look at the cross and say, if God could bring the salvation of the entire world out of this disaster, he can certainly work in my situation. It gives us a resilience that the world just doesn't understand.
There is one final application that I think brings us all the way home. We talked about Barabbas earlier, and the source material really emphasizes this idea of the great exchange.
This is the heart of the gospel. If you want to know where you fit in the story, don't look at Pilate. Don't look at the priests. Look at Barabbas.
Murderer, the rebel, the guilty one.
The guilty one. Barabbas was sitting in that cell, likely listening to the sounds of the crowd. He knew Roman law. He knew the cross was waiting for him. He deserved it. There was no legal argument that could possibly save him.
And then the door to his cell opens, and he expects the soldiers to drag him to his death.
But instead, he hears the most shocking words imaginable. You are free to go.
Why? How?
Because the King of the Jews is taking your place.
That's us.
That is every single one of us. We are the rebels. We have broken God's law. We deserve the judgment. But in the great court of heaven, the judge himself has stepped down from the bench and taken the shackles of the prisoner.
Pilate released Barabbas to satisfy the crowd, but God gave up Jesus to satisfy both justice and love.
It's the doctrine of substitutionary atonement played out in real-time history. The innocent for the guilty, the just for the unjust. Barabbas walked out into the sunlight, blinking, alive, solely because Jesus walked toward the darkness of Golgotha.
It changes how you respond to the story. You can't just analyze it anymore. You have to feel the gratitude.
You have to worship. When you realize, I am Barabbas, that was my cross, that was my death, it breaks your pride. It fills you with a love for Christ that nothing else can produce. It just transforms your life.
It really does.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to summarize what we've seen. We have looked at the history, the pressure, the politics, the fear. We've looked at the theology, the sovereignty of God, the fulfillment of prophecy. But ultimately, it comes down to two hearts.
The heart of Pilate and the heart of God.
Exactly. Pilate, who acted from fear and self-interest, willing to sacrifice the innocent to save himself. And God, who acted from supreme love, willing to sacrifice himself to save the guilty.
That is a God worth trusting.
It is. And I want to leave you with the scripture that anchors this whole narrative. I'm going to read Mark 15:15 again. Let it sink in, not just as a historical fact, but as the moment your freedom was secured. Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified.
A tragic decision that saved the world.
Indeed. And now, a blessing for you as you go. May you find deep peace today, knowing that no matter the chaos of the world or the failures of human leaders, God is firmly on his throne. May you see yourself in the release of the guilty Barabbas, and may your heart just overflow with gratitude for the one who took your place. Go in his grace.